This was a joint investigation by the Nordic public broadcast team who were investigating Russian spy ships with a particular focus on the Admiral Vladimirsky, shown here. This is one of these ghost ships. It had turned off its electronic identification equipment. And although the Russians have said that it's on scientific research program, if you look at it, it's covered in an array of aerials and radars, all of which indicate a very different purpose for it. Now, the Nordic program said that this was spying in the seas around the UK. Well, this is not new. For somebody like myself who served in the military for many decades, the Russians and the Soviets before them always used to have ships around the UK listening and watching. The only difference is they used to call them trawlers, and even though there was no evidence of nets or fish, that was their excuse for operating. But of course, with increased tensions following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, inevitably there's a worry about more sinister intent. But what does this thing actually do? What it does is listen away. It's the eyes and the ears of the Russians. It's looking at things like typhoons when they operate up in the north of the country, operating our quick reaction alert. They're watching our tactics. They're watching any shortfalls or any critical vulnerabilities. But the ship can also go around to the west coast, look into the Clyde, watch how our submarines are operating, and it can also go down to the south coast, down to Portsmouth, and watch the Queen Elizabeth class operating there. And increasingly, it's looking below the ocean to actually see the critical national infrastructure. What's particularly interesting that this revealed was last year, Norway revealed that one of its undersea data pipelines had been severed. They're not quite sure what caused it, but it could have been an act of sabotage. And also the Danish Defence Force took 112 pictures of Russian ships. If you remember the Nord Stream pipeline blown in on the 26th of September last year, and these Russian ships, some of them had cranes, some of them had submersibles, all of which, it doesn't prove anything, but it certainly points the finger of guilt. The key issue here, though, is since my day in the military, is a massive increase in subsurface critical national infrastructure. In the North Sea, it's fairly shallow. It's pretty easy to track that stuff, but there's also an element of redundancy there. But if you look west, across the North Atlantic, some of the data pipelines there, they're very deep, hard to track, but they are critical vulnerability. And also, as Europe has weaned off its dependency on Russian oil, we're now very heavily dependent on Norwegian oil and gas, all of which is provided by undersea pipelines. It just shows the critical vulnerability that we have to these sorts of capabilities.